Welcome back. This is Brighter Morning with Bo. My number here at the studio is 609-6283. You are free to call, and 609-6284. You can call in and make your voice heard, or you can call in and ask a question. Our second guest is Professor John Agard, and we will talk to him shortly. Before we do, I want to mention a couple of things that are happening internationally. Yesterday, I mentioned that the United States President, Mr. Joe Biden, had in fact signed an infrastructure bill for $1 trillion that will start the infrastructure rehabilitation and development works going in the United States. And there was another bill that had to do with social support that was before the Congress and the Senate, which they are also hopeful that they will pass. That came on the heels of very good news economically for the United States, so that situation is clearing up. And even as that takes place, the United States has opened up its borders to visitors from other countries, but you have to be vaccinated. And I had written about this. The United States and the UK are accepting vaccines that have been approved by the World Health Organization, and that includes Sinopharm and other vaccines. So they are opening up in the US and the UK. And the UK, they will start November 22nd, which is not so long away. But in the US, it starts immediately. Now, this is happening at a time when you have a spike in cases in Europe, especially Eastern Europe, and that is a cause for some worry. And there's also a huge spike in Russia as well, and all of those things, of course, make it very difficult to manage. But it is clear that the world is trying to come to some order of reasonable business. And in order to do that, it is opening up. The tourism industry is an industry that has been very, very badly hit all over the world. The COVID pandemic simply mashed up that industry, whether it is cruise ship, whether it is travel, whether it is international conferences. Everything went virtual and you couldn't do anything, you know. So I imagine some of that virtual reality engagement will continue, but there is need to travel. So we'll see what happens, and we will try to engage some of those issues. Is Professor Agard on the line? Very good. So we will talk to Professor John Agard, and we will hear what he has to say. He is very integrally involved in Trinidad and Tobago's articulation of issues at COP26. He's very much involved in the United Nations system and process. He is an expert in this field from the University of the West Indies, and we want to engage him a little bit on what has been happening. Professor Agard, morning. How are you?
Thank you for welcoming me to Brighter Morning with Bo. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I'm so glad to have you on, because I know few people in this country and region who know as much about what is happening in the world of climate change and its impact and the issues that are critical to sustainable development in a very, very transformed, climate impactful, what can I say, global system than yourself. And I feel very privileged to have you this morning. Can you summarize for us what has happened so far in COP26 that is significant for the world and significant for us in Trinidad and Tobago and in this part of the world?
Yes, well, it's very, very important that you'll see in COP26 that a lot of the discussion has been about how temperature has increased globally. In the Paris Agreement, the idea was that 1.5 degrees centigrade should be the limit. And so far, the temperature has increased by 1.1 degrees centigrade, higher in 2011 to 2020 compared to the origin, which was 1850 to 1900. So we have very little room to go. We're in a bit of a climate crisis. Okay, so there's only, we between 1.5 to 1.5 degrees centigrade as the limit. So we have very little room to go, and the decision makers need to take action rather than just have discussions in COP. Okay, it has to be converted into action. Okay. Now, in the case of Trinidad and Tobago, it's very complicated because we are an oil and gas producer. So we could discuss that further.
Yeah, well, let's take, what are some of the decisions that have been made so far, or at least discussed, and are likely to come out of the meeting that are going to be valuable, that we're going to have to kind of work with for the next 4 or 5 years, for instance?
Well, several countries have made decisions about the year in which they're going to commit to zero emissions. Okay? So that's some of the terminology in going on in Glasgow. Some countries have said they're going to stop using coal, for example. Some have put in a timeline by which they're going to exit from oil and gas and so forth. Whether it's 2050 or 2070. China has given a year, for example. They're the biggest emitter, for example. So commitments to convert into action and to come up with a plan about how you're going to exit from using, sources of carbon dioxide emissions, such as coal and oil and gas and so forth. Give a year by which you're going to exit and come up with a plan.
Okay, you mentioned Trinidad and Tobago and the dilemma that we have as an oil and gas producing country, and the Prime Minister alluded to that and included the issues in his own presentation to COP26. Would you like to comment on that a little bit, about our dilemma and perhaps how we need to work our way through this issue?
Yes, that's a critical issue. So oil and gas is not going to go away any day soon in Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago is going to try and monetize its assets. And so they have to come up with a timeline by which they're going to exit from depending on foreign exchange from oil and gas. So they have a project being developed now, for example, with Lightsource, BP, and Shell, in which 10% of the country's electricity needs will be provided from solar panels that are being constructed. And then the Prime Minister announced that they're hoping that they would go by 2030 to being 30% of electricity production in Trinidad and Tobago could be from renewables, whether it's solar panels or windmills and so forth, things like that. So it seems that although we don't have a plan as yet, that some decisions have been made, We expect in the next few years 10% of energy to be produced from renewables. By 2030, 30%. And then we need to hear the rest of the plan, where when will 50% be, what year are you targeting for 50% from renewables, what year from 70%, getting to 100%. Some countries around the Caribbean Sea are already close to 100%. For example, in Costa Rica, they are like 98% from renewables. Okay, some countries have made dramatic increases with renewables. For example, even Jamaica, not a small island developing state, Jamaica has 3 windmill farms. Okay, and their CO2 emissions have plummeted down. So it's not as though action isn't being taken. Some other countries are taking action, but Trinidad and Tobago needs to come up with a plan for how they're going to go forward with the commitments that they're making in COP26 in Glasgow.
Okay. Does this depend only on renewable energy? I'm talking about Trinidad and Tobago's point of view. Does this depend only on renewable energy production, moving away from oil and natural gas? Or does this also include things that we might do? I know that you are doing work, for instance, with the mangroves in Trinidad and Tobago. The IMA is involved in that. And that has implication for the CO2 emissions because of the entrapment and capture potential of mangroves. The Prime Minister mentioned in some of his talk about reforestation and the planting of trees and so on. He talked about the issues related to quarries and the work that can be done afterwards. Is there anything else that we can do that has been mentioned or needs to be mentioned?
Yes, so it's not only about renewables. That's just one point. So let me just remind that in the Sustainable Development Goals, there are 17 Sustainable Development Goals. One of them, number 7, is affordable and clean energy. But it's not only limited to that. There are other Sustainable Development Goals, for example, like number 13, which is climate action, and number 14, life below water, and number 15, life on land, is what they are stated as. So all of the Sustainable Development Goals are cross-connected. Okay, one affects the other. So Trinidad and Tobago has to increase reforestation, because trees, including mangroves, coastal areas, take carbon dioxide out of the air and sequester them, is the terminology used, put them into wood, so that the more trees that we grow, it would help take some of the problem of carbon dioxide emissions out of the air and fix them in wood and in soil as well. Okay, that's some of the projects. So some companies have already been measuring the amount of carbon dioxide taken out of the air and sequestered in wood and in soil. Okay, so that's very, very important that we increase reforestation efforts in Trinidad and Tobago and recognize the importance of the Forestry Division, who is helping, in doing that going forward. So that's just part of the plan. But also there are other issues related to other Sustainable Development Goals, like number 2, zero hunger. Okay, for example, you mentioned earlier that some people are going vegetarian, because they realize that particularly red meat production, like cows, produce a lot of carbon dioxide themselves because they have fermentation in their stomach. And so some people have ceased eating red meat and trying to get a protein from other sources like eggs and white meat and stuff like this, chickens and fish and so forth, as their preference. Okay, so there's some moral decisions that people have to make about not increasing the problem that we're talking about by taking personal decisions. Also, on an individual basis, instead of leaving things plugged into the wall where you're charging your phone, but your phone is not connected, but it's still consuming electricity, which is being produced by oil and gas in Trinidad and Tobago, mainly gas in Trinidad and Tobago. At least unplug it, so you make a personal decision, okay, to see how you can contribute. Look at your carbon footprint, okay. So I'm just saying personal decisions and moral decisions to be made on an individual basis to see how you could contribute.
Yeah, the tension between oil and gas energy and renewable energy, it seems to me, is a major tension, and the question is, how long is this tension going to last? Because it depends on the rate at which countries are able to convert. So a country like India, for instance, made a commitment that by 2030, which is only 9 years away, they are going to produce 50% of their electricity from renewable sources. So these are big commitments that some countries are making. But in a sense, a company like Shell has to find a way of financing its transformation from oil and gas to renewable energy. A company like BP, the same. So these companies have particular problems, which is how do they monetize what they are doing now, and at the same time finance, and with that monetization, finance transformation to greener systems. And Trinidad and Tobago itself, as a country, has that problem. How does it work with these companies, given their agendas, their timelines, and given ours, to monetize oil and gas within a given time frame and a timeline, and cause the conversion to take place for a greener economy? How is that tension likely to play out in a little place like Trinidad and Tobago, for instance?
Well, it's already playing out because, some of the energy companies like BP and Shell have also already made decisions about their exit from the oil and gas and petrochemical sector. They're saying essentially that it's energy they produce. It's not oil and gas.
Right.
That's just a mechanism.
Sure.
And so they are already transiting to developing most of their energy, which they're going to sell from renewables. Okay, so those are company decisions. They see the direction that the world is heading in, where taxes may be imposed on your carbon output, because that's one of the things being discussed already. Some countries are imposing tax depending on the amount of carbon dioxide that you emit. They're going to tax you to try and get you to reduce that emissions. Okay, so for example, in the European Union, when you export things to the European Union, they might make it more expensive by imposing a tax on it because of your carbon footprint. So people are coming up with mechanisms to try and make you move away from oil and gas, okay, based on your carbon output. So Trinidad and Tobago is now in that situation where, other countries might impose limitations on your exports, depending on the amount of carbon you're producing from doing this. So it's in Trinidad and Tobago's interest to think of the way that BP and Shell are thinking, which is that it's energy that they're selling, and they see the direction in which the world is going, and they're going to try and generate that energy and still sell it to you, but mainly from renewables. That's a decision because they know that this is a global issue, okay, going forward. So that's the kind of thinking that we need. And let me just state that I had a meeting with Prime Minister Mia Mottley in Barbados, and they have already gone in that direction. That Barbados has a feed-in tariff for many years, in which people who generate electricity, in their homes and stuff, can feed it into the grid. It's measured, and then instead of getting a bill, they actually get a check in the mail.
Yeah.
Okay? For the energy, the surplus energy they have produced from their own solar panels on their roof or in their yard and stuff like this. So that's the direction that we need to go. We are late and behind on doing this.
All right. Let me ask this question. I mean, one of the big issues is how this thing has to be paid for. I already raised the issue of oil and gas production and sales to markets financing the greening of the energy market by the big players, and they are going in that direction. So it's a question of time and management of these resources. For Trinidad and Tobago, it's the same thing. But the industrialized countries actually produce about 80% of the CO2 that is emitted in the world. And even with a country like Trinidad and Tobago, islands in general contribute less than 2%, as far as I'm aware, to CO2 emissions in the world system. How are islands going to be favored or taken into account, given that they perhaps are receiving the highest impact from climate changes that have resulted in significant sea level rise around islands? How is this thing going to be worked out so that islands who do not pollute comparatively and industrialized countries who have polluted significantly, how will we make the arrangements for transfer of finance to fund adaptation and sustainability, basically, adaptation?
Well, that's the major argument being made at COP26 in Glasgow. The small islands, developing states, actually went. There was a pre-meeting in which they came up with an approach and policies to go forward. So they went there with the intention of seeing if they could get commitments to financing. Okay, but so far it's not going very well, I'm afraid. There's an avoidance by those who are mainly responsible from accepting responsibility for providing financing. You would have seen all of in the news that, when the Paris Agreement was agreed, that there was a commitment of making, like $1 trillion per year available to those who are suffering the major impacts. But nothing even remotely close to that has actually been provided. Okay? Although in South Korea there's a Green Climate Fund, it hasn't received that amount of money. So that's the argument that the small island developing states went in. So around the Caribbean, the Caribbean is only producing less than 1% of the carbon dioxide emissions globally.
Yes.
Okay? But are suffering major effects because of sea level rise and high temperatures and excessive rainfall. For example, in Trinidad and Tobago, we've had a year in which there was a dry season and a wet season, but there's been no dry season. It's raining continuously and flooding all of the time. Okay, and next year it might be completely different. That we might have, no rainfall and drought and stuff like that.
Drought, yes.
Yes. Okay. So the climate machine is going between extremes, one to the other. So we are suffering major effects. So I'm just saying the argument has been made in Glasgow was that small island developing states, and this is through the organization AOSIS, as it's called, right? They have been making that argument, but they haven't gotten the kind of traction and response of commitments to financing from those who are responsible. And you would have seen in the news, of course, that the oil and gas companies have the largest number of persons who are present at that same meeting. Okay? So there's some advocacy on both sides. And oil and gas companies are well represented there. Okay? Trying to really stymie some of the advances that others are arguing to make. So a lot of politics going on in the background.
Yeah, let me ask you something. Were you present at that meeting of island states? You were present at that? I mean, you might have been present virtually, but...
Yeah, I have been in a number of pre-COP meetings. One with CARICOM, for example.
Yes.
One here through the British High Commission where Stuart Young was involved as well. All of these things. So a lot of ideas are being developed before they travel to Glasgow to make the arguments and so forth. Trinidad and Tobago has had a big delegation. There were 4 ministers. One is still there, which is the Minister of Planning and Development.
Yes.
But the other is the Prime Minister and Emery Brown and Stuart Young have come back to Trinidad and Tobago. So Trinidad and Tobago is also making its case in Glasgow on the ground as well, as are others.
Yeah, I know the energy ministers are meeting today in Glasgow. Our energy minister is in Trinidad, but I suspect that given the commitments that have to be made and the negotiations, the Minister of Planning is handling that aspect of it together with her officials, probably from both energy as well as environment related issues. And I mean, I want to ask you, how cogent was the case to be argued by CARICOM? And did they argue the case when they got to Glasgow well, and what was the impact?
Yes, well, CARICOM, the various ministers had a pre-discussion.
Yes.
And had ideas and so forth going on. But I'm saying that on the ground in Glasgow, that's not going well. They're not making the kind of traction and that they had hoped for. As I say, repeat, that the big issue was as who's going to pay.
Yes, of
okay?
course.
Right? Yeah. So
and how
the
are you
situation.
going to get access? You know?
Yes. Yes. So in the case of going forward, things are even worse because of COVID-19, which was unexpected.
Yes.
So there's a lot of deficit of money availability because a lot of the diversion of money has gone towards dealing with the COVID situation. So everyone is desperate and we're hoping for somebody to come up with taking responsibility, for what they produced and coming up with money. But that's not really happening, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Well, this is a serious situation which I want, serious challenge which I want to pursue. I'm going to break now to take a commercial break. But when we come back, I want to deal with three issues. One is the fact that islands have been involved in making their case for the last 30 years. And I want to play a short video on that. The second issue is that I want to address this issue of why there is such a resistance to support islands in their efforts for sustainability when the crime has been committed and everybody knows who the culprits are, and why can't we get that straight, and why can't we get a commitment that is valuable and viable. And the third issue I want to discuss really is the issue of financing and the mechanisms for access. I know Mia Motley has made a commitment to establish a financial institution in the Caribbean that will serve the Caribbean and basically get money from the funds that have been created globally to CARICOM, and that will serve not just CARICOM but islands. So I want to talk about those three things, but we'll take a commercial break right now, okay?
Welcome to Lifetime Solutions, where you can trust your roof to us. Our services include custom fabrication, steel framing, roofing installation, on-site roll forming, roofing maintenance and services. Call 223-ROOF or 223-7663 for a quote today, or visit our website www.lifetimesolutionst.com. Lifetime Solutions. You can trust your roof to us. Call 223-ROOF or 223-7663 for a quote today, or visit our website www.lifetimesolutionstt.com.
As businesses adapt to the new normal, let Magic Mist take care of your cleaning and sanitization needs with our COVID-19 BSCAI internationally certified technicians. With over 43 years of protecting the health of our nation, you can trust us to ensure your building remains safe, healthy, and functional. Give us a call today at 638-6675 or 332-5522. Magic Mist Services Limited, your total facilities management solutions provider.
Hi, this is Michael Ruplal, attorney at law. I'm inviting you to join me every Thursday at 5 p.m. on MCTV for the Social Contract. It's a new show where we will be discussing bills that are being debated in Parliament, topical legal issues and recent decisions of our courts, and where we'll be giving general legal advice on issues that affect you, the public. I encourage all of you to continue looking at MCTV, bringing you back to where you belong.
Welcome back to Brighter Morning with Bo. I want to show a video now about the struggle that islands have been making for the last 30 years. And then we will have a discussion with our guest this morning, Professor John Agard.
Never before has a UN member state disappeared. Now we are faced with the threat of losing many.
If Maldives cannot be saved today, we do not feel that there is much of a chance for the rest of the world.
If it was up to our community of small nations to solve the problem of climate change, it would have been solved 3 decades ago when we raised it. We refuse to be relegated to the footnotes of history and to be collateral damage for the greed of others.
Many hands make lighter work, and the coalition has a strong resolve and determination to work together.
It is my hope that policymakers are reminded that we have the tools, the science, the resources, and the only thing stopping us from stopping this crisis is ourselves. We have developed solutions. Now we have to act.
Okay, I mean, we saw that very dramatic over the last 30 years, what has been happening with sea level rise all over the world. I was at a meeting, it was an IDB meeting in the Bahamas some years ago when I was a minister. And I remember the Prime Minister of Bahamas saying that if the sea level would rise around the Bahamas by 3 feet, they would lose 2/3 of their landmass of the Bahamas in highlighting the problem. And the president of Tuvalu delivered his speech to the COP26 by wearing a suit and standing in the water. Tuvalu has lost, I am not sure what the percentage is, but possibly about 1/3 of its landmass. It's a very small island because of the rising water. And it is possible that nobody will be able to live in that island in a few years, and these people would have to be simply migrants to other countries all over the world. Now, this is a big issue for islands, and I mean, we can see it here in Trinidad and Tobago. I remember Trinidadian scientist, he was then at the university, I can't remember if it was the University of Ottawa or the University of McGill. He had come to Trinidad and he had indicated that the sea level rise was a big issue here. This was like 20, 25 years ago. And people had refuted that and said that that was not an issue. But the fact is that what he said was in fact true, and it's happening all around the country. I could certainly see it in Mayaro when I go there. And it is all over Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm sure it's happening in Tobago. I haven't been there for 2 years. What are we going to do about this issue, and how does this stop? Because I read recently that the ice in the Arctic Circle is melting at 3 times the rate that it was predicted that it would melt. These things are going to affect us very, very badly. What are we going to do about this? And can we do anything about it, really?
Well, I'm going to talk from a factual point of view. Yeah. In Trinidad and Tobago, we have sea level monitors. Yeah. There's one in the Port of Spain Harbor, there's one in Point Forte, and there's one in Scarborough. Yeah. And the data is uplinked to a satellite and then downloaded into a database.
Sure.
So we have facts. We're not giving an opinion with regard to this. We know the rate at which the sea level is rising. Okay? And it's causing visibly erosion on the coast of Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah, you can see it.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And also, when there's rainfall and there's floods, if it's high tide, the water can't run off.
That's correct.
Okay, so it increases the flooding, in fact. So we are already suffering the consequences. The question is, what is the action that we're going to take? Because we can't just be complaining about this and not doing anything to resolve these issues. Okay? So the action is where we have the problem. We know what is happening. We know what the consequences are to people. And what we are doing is nothing, really. Although Trinidad and Tobago, for example, has developed plans about, there was a company from Holland that was hired because Holland says they are accustomed to being below water.
Yes.
And they built seawalls and they did this and that and so forth. But those plans haven't been implemented. Trinidad and Tobago knows technically what needs to be done, but really hasn't done it. And the issue is really money. Who is going to pay for this? Okay? That is where we keep coming up with the same problem, blockage. Okay? Of who is going to pay. The idea and the arguments being made at COP26, I repeat, is that those who are responsible for creating the greatest emissions are the ones who should acknowledge what they have done that's wrong, and that they should come up with money to support those who are suffering the major effects. But as I state, I repeat, that argument isn't going well, in fact, in the arguments going forward. And we just remember that in the Paris Agreement, each country was supposed to come up with a nationally determined contribution of what would be their commitment to reducing carbon dioxide emissions. All right, so Trinidad and Tobago is sticking to its they will reduce CO2 emissions from transport by 15%. They can do more, but they won't do it unless somebody provides them with money. They've given a condition. Okay? They haven't made an outright commitment, but if somebody provides us with money, so I don't know, hopefully if they will get money from the Green Climate Fund, that Trinidad and Tobago could go a bit higher in reducing CO2 emissions. Yeah, go ahead.
Our emissions are about 30 times the emissions of a country like Barbados, for instance. And probably,
that's correct.
And probably, I don't know, I saw the figure some time ago. I think it's about 90 times what it is in an island like Dominica, which is a very green, mountainous, and full of water island with low levels of industrialization. So, I mean, we have a problem here which we need to address, but I do want to make the point, though, for people who are viewing, that the sea level rise problem, whether in Barbados, Tobago, Trinidad, or Dominica, or anywhere else, is not a problem caused by the people who live there. It is a problem caused by the global system, largely the industrialized countries which have had these dire consequences for people who live on islands and for islands themselves. Am I correct in that?
That's exactly correct, and that's the basis of the argument that's been made at COP26, that you caused this and you should pay.
Yes.
But I'm saying that responsibility has not been accepted by those who caused it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you are doing a major study now for the United Nations. I think it's due in the first half of 2023.
Correct.
And thank you for sharing that information with me. And it has to do really with the sustainable development of basically countries such as ours and the planet, the world system. How could we get action, as you say, a definitive response from the countries who should pay up for this and who made commitments in 2015, which was supposed to have been fulfilled up to 2020 on an annual basis, and have not, in fact, paid up and fulfilled their obligations. And such money as went into the coffers for that purposes never reached islands like ourselves who needed it most.
Yeah, well, that's a major issue, a stumbling block going forward. You know, small islands haven't been able to come up with project proposals about how they're going to use the money, because that requires a lot of technical input.
Yes.
Right? And they don't have, you know, enough people with the experience or knowledge of how to do that. And those who have money, such as the Green Climate Fund, require very detailed proposals, you know, to come up technical proposals and stuff like this. They've imposed certain conditions. So there is an effort, you know, around the Caribbean. There is a at the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center in Belize is the local hub for getting the money, and then in each country in the Caribbean, in Trinidad and Tobago, they're trying to see if they could get the Environmental Management Authority to be the local hub for the Green Climate Fund.
Yes.
So see if they could improve how to get money. Okay? So, but that there are certain issues that need to be sorted out before they are approved as the local representative of the Green Climate Fund. Okay?
I know, Professor Agard, that you are due to speak to the COP26 conference today. I want to wish you good luck in that.
Yes.
And I know that you will advocate our case and present your findings and speak from a universe of facts and information and knowledge. And I want to thank you for your contribution, both to Trinidad and Tobago and to the world system, really, in being a knowledge player in this very important era on this very important subject. I hope you will come back again. This is a matter that we cannot let rest. And it is something I'm very interested in. I mean, I don't see how Trinidad and Tobago can achieve sustainability unless we take deliberate action to do this. And I don't see how the islands of the world, CARICOM included, can make the progress that they need to make without the industrialized world taking what is essentially a moral decision to finance the work that needs to be done for the damage that they have caused to the world. And I intend to make this an issue. And I would be happy if you would play a role in this, because your knowledge capacity in this area is something very valuable, and the country needs to know about it. Our citizens need to know about it. The region needs to know about it, and we need to make that information available to the world wherever they will listen and wherever it can impact. So I thank you very, very much. I'll give you the last word as we exit now.
Okay. Well, I would just remind you that you were minister of the Ministry of Planning and Sustainable Development. And the word sustainable was removed from the name of the ministry now. It's now Planning and Development. That transmits the message. Sustainability is not a big issue in Trinidad and Tobago. It's not seemed politically anyway.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. We've got to get back there. And you and I worked on many things when you work with UNEP and so on. We tried to do many things here. But, you know, all that is past now. We've got to focus on today and tomorrow. And I want to thank you for watching. This is Brighter Morning with Bo. See you tomorrow when my guests will be Mr. Valmiki Arjun, Dr. Valmiki Arjun, and we'll be talking about the global system that is contributing to higher prices of everything now. And we will also talk to Mr. Rajiv Dipti, who is head of the Supermarkets Association, who will be talking about prices to you of stuff in the grocery store. Okay? So we look forward to seeing you in the morning. This is Brighter Morning with Bo. I am Bo Tiwari. We pass on for the 8 o'clock news now to Andrew Chan.